Many Ukrainian Catholics still worship in secret and have received no encouragement from Mr. Gorbachev.
The situation has not improved under Gorbachev. The increasing activity of Ukrainian religious believers in demanding their rights has been met on the part of the authorities by increasing repression. Unfortunately, the role of the Russian Orthodox Church in this has remained the same as in the past. It has cooperated with the security forces against religious believers in Ukraine. That, of course, is due to the fact that 66% of Russian Orthodox parishes in the Soviet Union belong in Ukraine. So, of course, the Russian Orthodox Church has a vested interest in opposing legalization of both Ukrainian churches.
The Ukraine is the second largest republic in the Soviet Union, annexed by the Russians in 1939. Some 30,000 Ukrainians live in England, most of whom or their relations fled their country either during the Second World War or after, when the Ukrainian Orthodox and Catholic churches were forcibly liquidated by the communists. In common with the Russian Orthodox Church, the Ukrainian Catholic Church celebrates its millennium this year, the 1000th anniversary of the official introduction of Christianity into their country. The service here in Bradford takes the form of an Eastern Rite Divine Liturgy and is sung and performed in Ukrainian. Father Paul Luniw took this service, and I asked him what role the church plays in an exiled community.
The church is the focal point for most of our community, that everyone from all the walks and all the backgrounds come to the church, to the priest, for spiritual guidance. We speak the language, we minister to them, and we are the focal point for the people in the church.
What brought most of the families here in the first place?
In the early settlement, it was in the early 1890s, there was an immigration on their way to America. But mostly it was the war years that brought everyone over here, not only here to England, to Germany, France, to the States, to Canada, Australia, all over the world.
How many of the families we've seen today would have lived in the Ukraine?
Most of them. Nearly all the families, the older generation you saw in church today, are from Ukraine.
How are the second and third generations coping with the memories of that aging generation?
The younger generation today, we do have a problem with assimilation, but now in this day and age of roots, when everyone's looking for the tradition and heritage, they have their own children, they are starting to come back and really relive the heritage the grandparents, the parents brought with them, the spiritual heritage, most of all, of the church, and then the cultural heritage, which is preserved. There's a great emphasis to maintain the traditions and the cultures in the sense of they have their own community. As I said earlier, the church is a focal point, and they have the community centres, which brings all the people together at some point during the week. Maybe during the week the people may not meet, but on a Sunday they all meet at church and say hello to one another. In the community centres at the weekends also, they will meet and exchange greetings and visit one another in the homes.
And they all speak Ukrainian to each other?
Yes, yes, they maintain the language, but they also speak English, but not among themselves. The older generation do speak Ukrainian among themselves, and even the younger ones now are beginning to speak to their children in Ukrainian so that they will learn the language and the culture and the heritage.
How successfully have they assimilated into British society?
Very well. The people of my era that were born here, we were all educated here. We have all the schools, universities and colleges. We have jobs here. And we've assimilated very well indeed. We like to think that we are good citizens of the UK.
What's the difference of the service we've seen today and the traditional Russian Orthodox Church?
The Russian Orthodox Church commemorate the Patriarch. We, Patriarch Pimen, we of course, being Ukrainian Catholics, have our heritage from Byzantium, from Constantinople as it was, from St. Volodymyr and St. Olga, and we commemorate Pope John Paul II in our liturgies, that we do have the Byzantine liturgy as they do, with the only difference that we are a separate church and a separate nation from the Russian Orthodox.
So is your liturgy unique in that sense?
Yes, it's a Ukrainian Rite Byzantine liturgy. It's our own tradition, our own heritage, in communion with Rome, of course.
What do you see for the future of the church?
I would like to see a great future for the church. There is, in the major centres, Bradford, Manchester, London, Nottingham, great communities, and probably those larger centres will all be the focal point in a few years' time. The smaller ones may dwindle off, but I think with the younger generation today who are interested in the heritage and interested in, most of all, in the church, there will be a future and a revival.